Welcome to the Not Just a Pony Ride podcast, presented to you by Hedger University. If you've landed here, you're probably passionate about how horses help people. Whether you're an instructor, therapist, in the business, or have experienced equine assisted services yourself, we're glad you're here. Join us as we talk about the benefits, the science, to-dos, how-tos, and all of the reasons why what we do is so much more than just a pony ride. And now, from the Hedger campus in Gretna, Nebraska, here's your host, occupational therapist Katie King.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I have Kim Berggren on, and she was just a joy to talk to. A really fun episode today. She has a pile of credentials. So she is a Path Intl Advanced Instructor, CTRI. She's a mentor, an Advanced Instructor Evaluator, and site visitor. And she's been in several different roles. Been on the board of directors, and she's traveled internationally quite a bit to do both site visits and do some instructing. So today we talked about a little bit of everything, but primarily her adventures and her journeys overseas, teaching this industry that we love so much to other countries like South Korea and Germany and France. And just about that dynamic, how that went. And as much as she taught, she also learned and gained insight from all of those countries and all of those places that she's been, and how that's really shaped her into the professional that she is now. So if you've ever been interested in international travel or how our industry looks differently in different countries, this is the episode for you. So I hope you enjoy it. Welcome, Kim.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me in today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to hear all about your adventures and life journeys. And why don't we just get started with, you can tell the audience a little bit about you, where you're from, and what credentials you have, because there's a lot.
I have a handful. So I'm originally from Wisconsin and born and raised. So I'm a Green Bay Packer fan by birth. And I really kind of got started with horses from birth. Family members, when you have family who have farms, even if extended, you spend a lot of quality time in manure and playing with the large animals. And if it had four legs, we rode it, the pigs, sheep, cows. Horses were a major bonus. So I started pretty young with that. And I really, I think I was like 8 and I was going to be a cartoonist, and they were impressed I knew the word. So, but that, you're not going to work for Disney and take over, which was my plan at 8, if you can only draw stick figures. So I kind of moved on to other avenues, and I was really looking at like physical therapy in my teenage years. And part of that came from my work with Special Olympics. So the school district that I went to was the hub for special education in our county. So from like kindergarten on, like there were kids in my class. So that was a pretty normal thing. So I just thought they were kind of cool guys and hung out with them, or, played with them when other people picked on them. I really didn't like that part, right? So I never really liked anybody being picked on. So I kind of go to the underdog, which is probably why I've been a Packers fan as long as I have, but we're doing better now. Anyways, you kind of move on, and I was in grade school, and I walked home, and so I'd walk past the gymnasium, and there was all of these kids in there, somersaulting and whatever they were doing. And later I found out it was Special Olympics. So I was like, well, this is great. And how can I help? So I got involved really pretty young. And by middle school, I was an assistant coach. And by my high school, I was one of the head coaches of our district. So, and I continued to do that for several years, even after school. It was just a lot of fun. Interestingly enough, I've never coached equestrian sports in Special Olympics, because both Michigan and Wisconsin didn't have that as a state sport. So though it's been done on some regional or smaller scales, neither state has it. So I've never coached it that way. So it's fantastic that they do it in other places, but I never did it. So probably when I was about 16, I read an article about this lady who was a below the elbow amputee who was giving lessons to kids with special challenges and riding. And I had gone to my riding instructor and said, "Hey, do you know about this?" She goes, "Oh yeah, I do. I know all about it at the place I used to work, which was called the Boys Ranch, which is in Milwaukee." She goes, "Oh yeah, we did a whole bunch of that sort of stuff." And so I called the lady, and she kept saying, "I'm not NARA certified. I'm not NARA." And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's the North American Riding for the Handicapped Association that officially changed its name to Path International. What was that, 2010? So at that point, and they talked about this place called Chef Center, and you could go get educated and learn how to do this. So for me at 16, that pretty much spun me in this direction. And I went to school for equine management, and so I learned how to put the food in one end and scoop the poop out of the other end, and as fast as possible. So I got A's in slinging it. So um, fast forward, I went through the Show Center ATC course, which is an accredited training course, which is what they had back then. And I started in 95 working on my certifications. So previous to that, I helped a small program in Wisconsin with the whole point of taking over the industry. So I've decided I don't necessarily want to take over the industry, but I like playing around in it. So I went to that. I am now a Path International Advanced Instructor. I have my CTRI credentialing. I'm a site visitor. I've been an evaluator for registered and advanced instructors. I'm have my ESMHL. So I've done a little bit of everything, and some of it well. So anyways.
Apparently, because you got all the letters and credentials to go with it, and that advanced instructor certification is no joke.
No joke.
That's hard.
It is it's totally worth it. And I think we were talking when I got, you get done with the education, you're like, I know everything. And then you're like, I don't know anything. Holy Christmas. I can't believe you guys let me loose. So so fortunately I had a lot of really great mentors and people who coached me along the way and kept me in line. God love them. So I think they retired because of it. But anyways, here we are.
What do you think? I mean, now you're dabbling a little bit in that mentorship stuff, and you're doing a lot of that. And what do you think when you were learning and you were coming up in all of those things, what types of mentorship things helped you the most? I just had Sabra Popoli on last week, and she was talking a lot about mentorship too, and how important it is for our industry. And I can't get over it, really.
Genuinely, it is the difference between an okay instructor and that next up and coming great instructor. It is the security blanket that you need, kind of going forward. We see when people come in for certifications and things like that, those who had that really solid mentorship and those who had, I'm not saying bad mentorship, but maybe not as much as they needed. And they either, because they wouldn't take the mentorship, or the mentors weren't able to give them what they needed going forward. And it really kind of sets the tone for those folks, and how well the certification is going to go for them, in the old process. And I think it's very much going to be the same in the new process going forward. If they don't have good, solid mentorship, this is not an easy industry to navigate.
So tell me a little bit about, so I have been working a lot in the introductory instructor, CTRI stuff. What goes into the advanced instructorship that makes it above and beyond? I know it's quite a bit, but can you talk me through that process just a little bit?
So, at the registered or that entry level, you understand, how to get on the horse, how to make the horse do the things. You have an entry level understanding of disabilities, and some volunteer management techniques, so on and so forth. And then this is like that times 10. So now it's not just an understanding of the disabilities, you have a deep knowledge of those disabilities, the pros, the cons, the contraindications, the indications. You are starting to, for lack of a better term, you have those eyes have developed in the back of your head. You can have your eyes closed and know what the volunteer students and horses are doing in the barn while you're sitting at your desk, right? It's just a significantly deeper understanding of equine management, equine psychology, equine movement, how that affects the body, how the body affects the movement, right? Which comes first, the equipment and the depth of, how that is affecting the equine and the client, your clients, like I said, it's not just, oh, they have ADHD and that means they're going to do X, Y, and Z. It's, oh, you start to pick out those characteristics in that particular individual. And it's not a big blanket statement anymore. It's a very small, detailed piece. It's for a lot of people, I think if you've done CHA, entry level is that level 1, level 2, right? We want you at level 2 to be an entry level, right? It's that level 4 or master level CHA is kind of your difference. I think that's my opinion.
So
anyways.
that experience and that knowledge and that really, really deep understanding is what led you to want to share that knowledge with people overseas, right? I mean, that's what kind of got you able to teach people in other countries. So tell us about your adventures and what all you've done outside of the country.
A few things. And actually, yes, it was because I was going to teach a standards course at a region conference where I was introduced or asked or invited by Lawyer Ranker, who had already had those kind of contacts because in South Korea, that was really probably my first really big overseas adventure. That was to go and be an instructor kind of role or a mentor role. And she kind of said, hey, I think you would be perfect at this. You have all of the credentials that they want. And having had at that point 15 plus years of mentoring instructors and training, that, she felt like I was probably a good person for it. So when I checked in with all of the people I needed to, like family and spouses and employers, and said, hey, totally expected them to say no. They all said, sure, this is a great experience. Good for you. So I left, and it was an adventure. And the first thing I would have to say is you have to kind of put any preconceived ideas of what you're going to see, just let it go. Let it go. In South Korea's case, what they are an incredible country of playing catch up. If you think about when the Korean War was, and that entire country was just wiped out. So in 50 plus years, they are doing some significant makeup and catch up and doing the best that they can and doing pretty well in most cases. If you think about it, I think it was the 88 Olympics, Summer Olympics were hosted in Seoul. So I worked at the facility that they had been hosted at, or a portion of the equestrian sports had been hosted at. And to give you a reference, in 88, they didn't have an equestrian team. So riding horses was not something they were doing. That was very much something that royal people did, or if you were a jockey, for racehorsing, right? Racing is big over there. And that was very interesting because I've never seen such mellow horses. Like they're just leading them around. They're getting ready to go out to the track and the horses are like, okay. Like they're not, I mean, they ran fast, but you're just saying, okay. Interesting. I was very interesting. So everything over there has an influence, right? And Korea, again, is constantly looking out to other resources. So there is a lot of conversation about how they're coming over here to the United States and purchasing thoroughbreds because they're trying to improve. They were coming over here and buying quarter horses because they want that's not on their island, right? So you got to come and get it. So where do you go get it?
What breeds of horses are most common in Korea, South Korea?
Now thoroughbreds, thoroughbreds and Jeju ponies, so Hoflingers, they like Hoflingers and warm bloods. So, because again, they go over to Europe, Austria, anything like that.
This episode of the Not Just a Pony Ride podcast is sponsored in part by
Equiforce. Equiforce is a database that allows you to track every facet of your organization, from horse, donor, and volunteer management to scheduling, grant tracking, incident reports, and tracking participant progress too. This is not a one-size-fits-all setup. Instead, Equiforce personally works with you to learn how your facility functions and takes note of your specific terminology so that they can create a unique system to match the needs of your organization. And of course, Equiforce provides an ongoing training and support so that your database can grow with you. Visit them at www.equiforce.com. That's EQUI-FORCE.com.
This episode is also sponsored in part by
Wooden Horse Corporation and the Equisizer. The Equisizer is a handcrafted, non-motorized mechanical horse used by equine assisted service programs worldwide. The Equisizer requires no electricity, tools, or maintenance and can be used indoors or out for evaluations, warm-ups, stretching, mounting, dismounting practice, and volunteer training, and build confidence with students, clients, and volunteers. It can easily carry the weight of 2 adults, offering the unique option to ride tandemly. To learn more about the Equisizer, visit equisizer.com. That's EQUICIZER.com. So do they have a governing, or not a governing body, but, like credentialing body, or, like how we have Path or CHA, or we have organizations that help us set standards. Do they have those there? I mean,
They do.
use Path?
They started with, and there is a Path accredited program over there. I believe it's the Samsung Arena is what it's called. So, and they do have some Path International certified instructors there. And I know that two of them predominantly work in more of a therapy based, as in I think they're OTs. I think, but they're therapists. So that's kind of really more their focus. Whereas the other one is, he had gotten his Path International certification, and he's working at one of the colleges. So they have college-based education for this, as well as specialty programs. So when I went, I was hired to go over and help train the trainers. And they have a system that is equivalent to Path International, but they couldn't qualify for a Path International grant program because at that time they don't put actual students on. And they didn't think that was a great idea at the time. They do have a governing body. It's called CATH, which is the Korean Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship. And it's a governing body that is recognized in the country, and they mandate continuing education, and they mandate that you have to take a lot of tests going into it. It's impressive. So I had the time that I was there, we worked a lot on teaching techniques and mounting techniques and dismounting and equine training and selection was a big one as well. And because of their understanding of what was good and what wasn't, it also helped me appreciate that you don't need to have a big fancy facility with lots of fancy equipment to get people on and off horses to be successful. So you just have to have a good plan, and they were great. So we used a lot of portable blocks, and some places had some nice ramps and things of that nature, but a lot of portable blocks. So also looking at, where the country was it, and this was 2013, I think was the very first time I went, and I've been back multiple times since, but that was the first time. And just how much they've grown and developed over the time, including equine welfare, and acknowledging that they need to make those changes or adjustments. Saddle fit, so going back and having to teach saddle fit and form to function is something that they're now catching up on. Not that they had cheap saddles. You don't see a lot of cheaply made saddles there. They make the investment into the higher end equipment, but not always understanding how that went together.
Was the language barrier ever something that was difficult? Like I could see, especially when explaining some of those higher level things like saddle fit and that type of stuff, that language barrier, was that ever difficult?
Oh yeah. So I was very fortunate because unlike the United States, other countries mandate English as a second language, or they mandate a second language. So there was almost always somebody in the group who at least understood English.
Mhm.
I had a translator all the time. They really did not like to let me loose, so that was good. And actually, a lot of my teaching or training came after the class because of cultural barriers were more of an issue than language barriers. I probably I had a 15-minute conversation with a monk when I was out touring, and her words were "cool breeze," and I could say yes, and hello, and goodbye. But you can get around those pieces. It was more of some of the cultural things. So it is not it's not nice or polite if you question the teacher in that
Mm.
culture, because that means the teacher didn't do a good job. And in the US, we're like, give me questions so I know that you understand. And
Right.
if not, I want to make sure you do. So often when I figured one of my classes, a lot of them had studied here in the US, so they understood that culture. And
Dynamic,
so
yeah.
that dynamic, so they were much better about it. And they asked some questions. And the other group, which I saw, they were full-time students. There were a couple in there that most of them understood English, or at least had something coming of it, even if they couldn't speak it.
Mhm.
But they were more likely to ask me questions after class when I was out in the barn area. If I was getting a horse out or I was doing anything, then I got questions. They would
More
find
of an
somebody who,
informal setting.
yeah,
Yeah.
then it was okay. So it was an experience. It was a great experience.
So what other you went to, let's see, Germany and France as well, correct? And
Correct.
how did those experiences differ from each other?
Um, well, first of all, you go to Germany and that's where it starts, right? Like that's where all of this stuff starts. And they have incredible, I mean, their equine welfare is it's pretty strict. Like there's a lot of rules, and not bad rules, that's just things you have to know. So here in the United States, you go to a schooling show and you see little kids out on their horses, or adults out on their horses. In Germany, you have to, in order to show at a certain level without side reins on your horse, you have to go to a class and you have to prove that uh, you know, blood pressure, respiration, that you understand basic feeding, basic care, parts of the horse, some working knowledge of saddle fits, of how to make and you have to go out and prove that you can actually make the horse do that stuff before you
Interesting.
can go showing. Now, you can do that privately, but if you want to go to a show, you have to prove that you've done this, that you have some experience, and you don't get to just go to the next level because you're bored at this one. You have to go and take another test, and there's a written test and a practical test. So it was very interesting, and I appreciated what they were trying to say, and it was a lot on the equine welfare.
So how do they manage that with regards to therapeutic riding? Because obviously we put kids and adults on horses that don't have, those high level abilities in equine knowledge. So then do they manage that completely separately?
They have therapeutic riding instructors, and it's a pretty significant process to get certified as one of those.
I would
Um,
assume.
and uh, it, and they do a lot more one-on-one. There's no such thing as group lessons, per se. You might get a couple of clients at once, if you're working with a school group, but even
Mhm.
then. And we have volunteers, and volunteerism in the United States is very much part of our culture, which is not necessarily a part of any other culture the same way. So
Interesting.
same thing in South Korea, getting the volunteers. So they had much smaller group. You didn't have 10 kids. You had two in a TR setting.
Mhm.
And because they could manage that, or a one-on-one because they could manage that. And same thing in Germany, a lot of one-on-ones so that the instructor can have that more hands-on piece.
Mhm.
So it's very interesting. It was very
Interesting.
interesting.
So then we had talked a little bit before too about just how different their equine management is, like in their therapeutic barns, and that, and how much they do with much less space than we do, right?
Oh, absolutely. That I think that's the other thing, that when you go someplace else, you have to kind of throw that out of your brain of what you must have. Other countries don't have the same luxury we do. I mean, the United States is a massive. There are countries that fit in Texas. So if you, you kind of put that in perspective. So here we have regulation for how many acres you have per equine, and they have some things like that, but not to the same extent. So there's a lot of pasture management, rotation, exercising. Arenas are not 100 by 200, so you could get a lot of people in there. You have much smaller arenas, a lot of outdoor arenas, that sort of stuff. Exercise programs. It's, like if you lease a horse in Germany, there are expectations, and that you're going to show up on your days to clean the stall and feed the horse and make sure it gets exercised, and whatever that you deem is appropriate. So those are all of those things. But yeah, I'm always fascinated with how much they could do in such a small space, from taking care of their animals, and they all looked great, to working with these clients and not having, like you said, big fancy lifts or anything like that, because it wouldn't fit in that space anyways.
Right.
So making it work with what they have.
Doing more with less. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So when you were in Germany and France, did you do instructing with them, or was it, kind of observation based, or what kinds of things did you do there?
So in Germany, I was there I did I did a lot of observing. I did a little bit of teaching, just kind of some demo teaching, and then did a couple of small clinics of, here's what we do, and here's what I do, and this is, and, that kind of stuff. And it was and basically I was coming at it from a US perspective, because clearly I do things very
different.
differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I went to France, I was there as a site visitor. So it was purely observational. Right. And so I got to go as a site visitor and see this facility and look at their programming and what they were calling therapeutic riding, and really kind of what the services were that they were providing were more mental health. They had all of the right professionals. They were doing all of the right things. And it was, again, amazing what they were doing in this space with these animals, with not all of the, they had a ramp, so they had that kind of stuff. And it was it is a beautiful facility. So it had been designed for different purposes. It had been like a training facility. So all their trainers and riders could come in from all over and train there, and that didn't work out. And these guys stumbled across it and made it amazing. It's an amazing place. So Helene and Eric. So it was, and I met them actually at a I had met them once at a regional national conference is where I met them the first time. But I think I actually got connected to them because of a friend who bumped into me while I was at a beef cattlemen's association promoting therapeutic riding. Yeah.
That's awesome. I have no idea why or how that happened, but I love that.
That's a whole nother story. But anyways, so it was like, hey, my friend wants to do this, and she's in France, and she had lived here. And now she's from France. She's back home. Can you help her out? And got her connected with some people who could help her mentor her and things like that. And then it was really great when the opportunity came and they said, would you be willing to go? I'm like, oh yes, please, by all means. So it was phenomenal. And again, just doing a lot with a little, beautiful facilities. Equine welfare was again different. It was phenomenal. The animals looked great. And France, again, she had a lot more space. So you kind of you felt a little bit more normal, or if you will.
Yeah.
And, again, I go to Germany and I'm expecting these big, huge places, and you're like,
nope,
they're not huge. Oh, okay. And, the concept of how far somebody will travel. I mean, it's not you think about all of the people we talk to, and they're like, oh, I have clients that drive an hour, to come to us because this is what we do, or X, Y, and Z. And they're like, oh, I had to drive 20 minutes. It was terrible. like I have a client who drives a total of 20 minutes. You're like, really? like that's a big deal. Like that's not normal. So I'm like, okay. And
Interesting.
Korea, there's a lot of travel, right? So if they're not living in the city, they're probably traveling to you. So subways and buses and all of that sort of stuff, because well, there's a lot of cars there too, but not a lot of people don't own them because of the cost. So
Right.
it was a totally different thing. Germany and France, have something similar with, like the ADA here. Korea does as well, but it's newer. So those are things that you kind of don't even think about either when you go to other countries. Is when we talk about, and we have a lot of work to do on this, so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying here, because we really are not where we need to be. But if you look at, where we were and where we are in disability acts and things of that nature, and trying to bridge some of those gaps, you don't realize how far we've come until you go someplace that, it's not there.
Accessibility isn't
Accessibility
there.
is still not there.
Yeah.
And how they manage it is great, or culturally how they're accepting it. So and though you think about some of these countries where up until 30 years ago, really, still hiding people. You didn't take your person out if they were disabled or different. And mental health, right? Like that's still new. Things like ADHD are still new and learning and evolving. Autism, new, learning and evolving. And these were things that,
Yeah, and finding, I mean, identifying the disability, and that is one thing, and then the next step is understanding what can help it, and then beyond that is, okay,
actually,
here's a specialized service and actually accessing it. So I could imagine
yeah.
that has a long way to go.
Yeah. And again, they've come leaps and bounds. They do learn quickly. They do observe from around them and assimilate it quickly. So it's impressive, some of the stuff they're doing. You're like, wow, we should be doing that. We're so far to go. We have so far to go, right? So totally
Everywhere is
different.
different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anywhere else that you would like to go, or what's next on your bucket list for international travel?
Everywhere. So I obviously I would love to go see New Zealand and Australia. I mean, who doesn't want to go see that? I would go back to Greece. I did go there for an international conference once, and that was fantastic. I'd go back to I go back to Greece. Really, pretty much anywhere. I don't know that I've said, oh, if I never get anywhere but this one place. So no, I just really like to travel and see what the other cultures, really, how other people live, what the norms are, dispelling what our preconceived ideas are, right?
It broadens our thoughts and the way we do things, and it helps us not get in such a rut with the way things should be when you see how other people can do it. And I think that's wonderful.
Absolutely. And that was a huge takeaway, is, we very much get stuck in, and you have preconceived ideas of what somebody or what some culture is like. And then you get there and you're like, well, this isn't at all what I thought it was, right? Like, they're very warm, they're very friendly, they're very kind, they're very worried about if I like the food. What American takes you to a restaurant and the restaurant cares if you like what's on their menu? You're either going to eat it or you're not. And the waitress is the only one who's going to be like, hey, am I going to get a good tip out of this? I was in South Korea, and we went to this restaurant specifically because of the food that they had. It was a lot of seafood. And if you don't like a lot of seafood, you're probably going to struggle. But there was a lot of seafood. And we went there specifically, and the ladies, I mean, I'm way away from anything where most Americans show up. And the ladies, the cooks, the waitresses, they kept coming back to make sure that I was okay with the food, and should they go find something else in the kitchen. And we're like, no, please don't take a stop. Right. Like, it was,
you should see what I eat in America. This is wonderful.
This is fantastic. Like, I'm eating stuff out of a box that's frozen and breaded, and it has, the Vandekamp guy on it. So this is great. So yeah, that was just a very different experience.
Yeah.
It was a different experience to go someplace where I was not the normal. I didn't speak the language. I didn't look like anybody else. I had small children that would run up to me just to say hello because
Oh.
I was different. And then
Mm-hmm.
also, right, and others where I would wave and they'd cry. So you're like, I don't know what that means.
That effect on people.
Apparently I do, right? I think I do everywhere, so it doesn't really matter. But that it was still strange. It was children. It's usually adults. So, but yeah. So that like that whole understanding or perspective of what it's like to be someplace that you don't quite fit, and I'm a pretty easygoing and apparently I assimilate well, but I actually had a harder time coming back and eating the food when I came home than I did going. So I now seek out good Korean food.
There you
But
go.
right. So anyways, but it's that same idea. I could go to Europe, right, Germany, and walk around, and as long as I didn't say anything, nobody knew who I was
Mm-hmm.
until somebody would speak to me, and then and that puts you in that same mindset of, as a therapeutic riding instructor, ultimately we have to learn somebody else's language all the time, and they
Mm-hmm.
have to try to learn ours. We just have to be quick enough to pick up on what that is so that we can meet somewhere in the middle to make that happen. And I think as an instructor, I became a far more I've always been intuitive. I think it really helped me develop that intuitiveness of what were my clients really trying to say, not what are the words that they were using, what were they really trying to say from that experience.
Yeah.
And because you don't need words. I mean, I clearly I taught in Korea to children who probably didn't understand what I was saying, and they still did it. We still got somewhere. There was still some, smiles, and they were steering. So we got where we needed to go with me not really having a very big vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
So, and using an interpreter, what didn't always work in that case.
Yeah. Well, what would you say to someone who wants to do international travel in this industry or wants to be a part of that? What did you get out of it? What would you tell someone who wants to do that?
I would tell anybody who has the opportunity to take it. Um, Make sure you have realistic expectations. So, like I said, space is different in other places. Rules are different in other places. um, Understanding of equine welfare and management are different. And depending on, you have a choice of condemning or contributing to growth. And I think as long as you kind of go with that mindset, that you're willing to share what you know, as well as willing to learn what they have to share to you, because I think everybody has something to teach. I think
Mhm.
everybody, you never stop learning. And if you're like, I'm going to go to this place, I'm going to show them everything I know, and they're going to be great, and I have nothing to learn from them, then it's not going to be a success. Right. So, but that's absolutely hands down. If you have a chance, do it. I mean, I would do it again. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. So,
How would someone get into that opportunity? Like if I don't have the opportunity or anything like that, but I need to build connections to do some international travel, what would you suggest?
um, watch the Path International website. I mean, it's
Mhm.
every once in a while job offers pop up. Reach out. Reach out to some of those international organizations, such as like,
Mhm.
Hetty's the big federation, but just kind of reaching out and seeing what's out there and available. The connections are a little tricky at first, but kind of
Yeah.
once you're there.
You just got to get plugged into the right places and get going.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very good. Well, Kim, this was awesome. I loved hearing about all your travels. I have never been overseas, and I've always been curious about how they do riding and therapeutic horsemanship and stuff over there. So this was wonderful. I learned a lot. So I think our audience will too.
Wonderful. Great. Nothing else. I
So
hope it was entertaining.
it was. So as we close, I always close my podcast with the same question. So you can tell me about either if you've ever had a heart horse in your life, or if you have a kindred spirit or something you feel, an animal or something you feel represents you.
Probably the Tasmanian devil. Um, that might be one of them. But yes, I do have that hard horse. I have a wonderful American quarter horse, and I I got lucky I was in the right place at the right time. He was a young 2-year-old, and he was in the barn where I was, and with my trainer, and I played crash dummy a little bit and really got to see him grow and develop, and really, really connected with him, which was unusual. And when the people were, they had great plans for him, and then they decided they didn't have the immediate resources necessary, so they were going to sell him, and I just so happened to have that money. So it was meant to be. And so
Mhm.
he is now, gosh, 20, 21, 20, 21, 20, 22. He's 22, 23. So I'm really bad. I always have to look at the paperwork because in my brain he's forever 10.
Right.
And right. And he's done a little of everything, and we've done a little of everything and nothing well. So I got him as a reining prospect, and we did a little bit of that, and we tried Western Pleasure, and that was painful for me. That was awful. So it's too, no, I can't go. I don't think that's slow. He can, I don't. So we've done a little jumping, trail riding, a little gymkhana, whatever comes up. So he's
All
great.
around good boy.
He's an all around good guy. So yeah.
Very good. Well, Kim, thanks again. And don't be a stranger. Hopefully we'll have you on again here soon.
Love to be back on. Thanks, Kate.
This podcast is presented by Hetra University, an educational arm of the Heartland Equine Therapeutic Riding Academy. Hetra University's mission is to provide high-quality educational offerings to our participants and the equine-assisted services community. Craving more content like this? We invite you to check out our series of webinars and much, much more over at hetrauniversity.org. If you'd like to help us work toward our mission, you can make a donation by clicking on the link in the show notes below or visit us at hetra.org. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Again, my biggest thanks to you all for helping Hetra change lives one stride at a time.